Hey everyone, welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, coming at you for yet another podcasting hour of greatness here on YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, etc., where all good podcasts are sold. This week I have two guests I am welcoming. That's just kind of rare. Usually it's one-on-one on this channel, but this week I have two filmmakers. And y'all know I'm a bit of a cinephile. I do love movies, and I love documentaries. And in this case, these are a couple of documentarians. Now, this is Curt Jaimungal and Desh Amila. I hope I didn't butcher those names. And Curt there is the writer-director of a film that they are now promoting called Better Left Unsaid. And Desh is the producer. Yeah?
Correct.
Great. So welcome to my show, guys.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
All right. So let's go ahead and talk about your film. First off, how are people, because I want to get this out right away, so in case people see this interview and then immediately want to go see it. First off, where do they find your film? Because you guys had to send me a link to it, and I've watched it a couple of times, and I thought it was quite good. So I do want people to watch it.
The best way to watch it is go to betterleftunsaidfilm.com. It will be available late March this year, and it will also be available on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Prime, and if you want to, after this conversation, if you feel as you want to actually watch more than what's given to you, which is you have a 90-minute version and you have a director's cut, which is 2 hours. That'll be exclusively available from our website, betterleftunsaidfilm.com.
Great. Okay, good. So there you go, folks. So that's how to find it. Check it out. So that being gotten out of the way, this film is about extremism on the left. Mainly, that's what his focus is on. It talks about extremism on the right and tends to kind of say it's rather simplistic, which I wasn't totally sure about, but that's not really the subject of the conversation today, because you mainly concentrate on the left. And I have found good cause for concern on both ends of the political spectrum. And in fact, my background in study, I find both ends of any spectrum kind of difficult, because those are the extreme ends. And that's where things get very black and white. That's where things get very us versus them. That's where it's our way or the highway. That's how I sort of see the word extremism means, or how it's manifested in the real world. But the first thing I wanted to ask you is, in talking about the extreme left, how do you separate the extreme left from the left overall? Because there are people who use very sloppy language with this, and will paint everybody on the left with the tar brush of awful, when in fact it is a subset of people who are actually being extreme and difficult. I don't know. So I wanted to get what are your views on that?
I'll take that one, Desh, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
There is a salutary place for the left, and there's a salutary place for the right. I try to make that delineation in the film itself. Around the midway point, a little bit later, is where I give concrete bullet points. Hold on, I'm just changing my view, because right now it's just Desh. I had it on speaker view, so it's just Desh right now. Just and I want to see everyone. Okay, no, not that there's anything wrong with Desh. Okay, right. So there's something salubrious about both the left and the right. It's just that in their extremes, it goes off the rail. That's almost the definition of extreme. That's the crux of the film. That's pretty much what we're trying to say, is what makes it extreme. So to put it down to a sentence is extremely difficult. Even an hour and a half, I feel like, is not enough. Maybe it should have been a 5-hour movie or a whole series. But I did at some point in the film give 4 bullet points as to here's what I think characterizes the extreme left and the extreme right. So if people want to know, I have to watch the film. I don't want to give that away. It's almost like a climax of the film.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. Well, I wanted to sort of put that out there at the beginning, because I wanted people to kind of get in a summary form, you know, I mean, because you are a precise person. You have a math physics background, which I really appreciate. And therefore, the language that you choose to use is purposeful. That's a good thing. But it is still important to clarify ourselves kind of from the get-go so people understand where we're coming from. Where would you say you are politically? And would you say that your personal views influenced how you wrote and put together the film?
I would characterize myself as apolitical. I'm neither left nor right. I see there's something nourishing in both. I see there's something rotten in the extremes as well. I would say that, yes, my personal views color the film, because I don't know how one can make any piece of anything without their own points of views coming across. I try to eliminate it and change it as best I can. It's one of the reasons why the film is it's not so much a film that tries to convince you of a particular point of view, but shows you, here is my thinking, and here's my reflections. Here are my questions. Here are the thoughts that occurred to me when I was researching the film at this point. And then I lay it out.
Cool.
For me, I consider myself political center-left, and very similar to Curt. Yes, my political beliefs did help shape the film. And I want to make this point clear. Curt and I disagree on many things. I normally say, we agree on about 80% and we disagree on about 20%. We wanted to make it a point that although we have disagreement with regards to ideas that we ascribe to or we believe, we first appeal to our common humanity to make the film. There's this new form of belief that is prevalent, which is that, you should not work with people you have disagreements with. And that it is a new phenomenon. There was the idea that one should not speak to a conservative. I used to believe those kind of things. But in this film, we are in disagreement about many things. And we're not, again, trying to tell anyone to believe one way or the other. We are providing a lot of information for people to take whatever speaks to you and then think it through. And you're going to disagree. Some of you might disagree on certain parts of it, and that's okay. That is by design, because I disagree with certain parts of the movie, and that's fine.
Well, exactly. I mean, overall, you have a message and you have a theme that runs through this thing. And in fact, I thought this quote from fairly early on, and I failed to write down the English I think professor who said this. Said it's hard to understand what the anti-West left is trying to achieve other than an extreme version of collective authoritarian control. Thought that was a good observation, and it's the thing that I sort of rail against when it comes to extremism in any form. Authoritarian control. I've lived under authoritarian control systems. I know exactly what that feels like. And I mean, I like physical abuse, mental abuse, all of it. I've experienced all of that. So I don't want that for everybody. I want the exact opposite of that for everybody. And I know that, and so I know what it looks like, and I know what it sounds like. And it's not on day one of exposure to a radical extreme agenda. You're not hearing all of the violent extremist rhetoric. If it's done right, you're hearing things you can agree with. You're hearing things that make sense, that are rational and logical to you. And you begin walking a path towards extremism the more you go into this belief set, whatever the belief set is. I'm not just talking about the left. But with the left, I think that the invitations or the thing that the appeal of it is from a certain point of view, certainly from mine, is that it appears that there is an alliance with or a push towards human rights. We only want human rights for everybody. We only want everybody to be considered equal. We only want everybody to be on the same level playing field. What's the problem? But then it pushes it into this extreme version of collective authoritarian control. What did you find in your research and in discussing? I know the film's all about this, but I'm kind of curious, besides what's just in the film or what you've seen since or before, whatever, how do you think this has been happening? Do you think that films like yours, work I do, other people, other podcasters, other people stepping up, talking about this, do you think it could change it? Do you think we can pull some people back from this extreme end?
I think it's already happening. The Trump presidency showed the world this facade of American exceptionalism. America is a strong democracy, cannot be shaken. The idea of American democracy versus what really happened during their presidency, which, just like you've seen the rise of the far right extremism, you saw a considerable rise in the far left extremism. So lots of people got vocal on the back of it. Some people thought people were overreacting, but history will write that those people who overreacted actually got it right. And, I don't think it's over yet. America's not out of the weeds. And this is not a uniquely an American problem. This is actually happening all around the Western civilization. But the good news is there are a lot of people who can see through this and speaking out. Our film is not the only one that's speaking about this, but we are taking a slightly different approach. But I think I am a optimist, a rational optimist, as I like to call it. I do see the more people speak about it, it will get better, but in no way we are out of the weeds. And I think podcasts like yours, films like ours, articles by people like John McWhorters, Peter Bogasian's, Helen Puckrose, and Coleman Hughes's take us more towards just questioning popular narratives will all help. And I think this again, the other thing that's super important is this didn't happen. I know I mentioned, the Trump presidency. That didn't just happen in a vacuum. Right. A lot had to happen way before that for it to come to that point. So getting out of this is also not going to happen in a short time period. Right. And we will have to be doing this for a little while before this gets to a point where we feel as, okay, we may be out of the woods now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about that. It's not so dissimilar to how it works at an individual level, I suppose you could say, as opposed to the macro level, where it doesn't take a day to make a radical extremist. It takes weeks, months, even years. And the idea that you're going to have a one-off, one-and-done conversation, which seems to be this weird idea right now. Oh, how do we deprogram all these people? How do we do it? How do we do it? Well, you got a month or two, right? I mean, it's not something you can just condense into an hour-long conversation, and you produce fact A and fact B, and oh my God, everything changes. Doesn't quite work that way because of the emotional investment. You mentioned a disparity, what one could call a hypocrisy, during the course of talking about what leftist activists do, where they will highlight and really go to town on examples of microaggressions, sexism, racism, etc. here in the United States, Western cultures, for example. Oh, by the way, I want to let you know, I'm currently doing a master's program through a UK university in psychology. So you are completely right that these things are definitely not just in the United States. We see influences of this in my university study right now that I'm doing in 2021. So I will definitely attest to that fact that this is not just a United States problem. But this disparity point, you point out that they are, talking about all these things that happen in a very inflated, exaggerated way, I believe. I think some of the problems and issues that people run into are extremely real, but I think they get watered down when so-called microaggressions and things that are taken out of context and, just the minor disagreements and problems of life that you have with people, misunderstandings, etc., are turned into this very overtly aggressive, how dare you do that kind of thing. Yet we don't see that same level of concern for the kind of abuse and oppression that occurs, say, in the Middle East with feminists, or China, the Uyghurs. I mean, there's a lot of groups and areas we can point to on this planet where there are extreme versions of oppression that don't compare in any way to what goes on in the United States. But nobody will talk about those things because they're too busy with the microaggressions. And I'm curious, you had your take on it in the film. I think if you elaborate on that a little bit here, and I'm wondering why. What do you think from your study of this, because you've done deeper dives on it than I have, why is that? Why do you think that it's all here, but over there doesn't really matter?
It seems like when they say that we care about, let's say, human rights or indigenous lives or whatever it may be, that it's a mask for acrimony toward the West. And so as soon as you have something that's pro-West and you demonstrate, let's say you were able to conclusively demonstrate that the West has done the most out of any other region of the world, historically, spatially, to overcome the injustices of the past and make themselves less racist, whatever it may be, that the extreme left claims to want. You demonstrate that they're not willing to concede that because they distrust their father and they want someone else. Well, it's difficult to say what's the cause. I talked about this before on another podcast where as soon as someone gives a causal explanation, causation is such a tricky thing to pin down that as soon as one says that the cause of some phenomenon is this other phenomenon, that tells me more about their psychology rather than what's going on mechanically, because there are myriad implication arrows into that one phenomenon. So how can you say that it's this that caused that? You have to do it's extremely difficult.
I know.
So what is the cause? Well, one cause, Jung has a great, you're doing a master's in psychology. So perhaps you've come across this quote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd it seems, in order to not face their own soul. So perhaps, hopefully what this documentary can do is to encourage people to not point the finger even against the crazy leftist, radical leftists, because there are going to be a portion of our audience that are looking to the film to justify their current beliefs about the extreme left, because it's like, oh, this is a film that denounces the extreme left. I love it. Well, think about how you're wrong and how they're right. And that's tricky.
Yes, it is.
I'd like to add a point or two. I think one of the things, and I have this perspective because of where I come from. I was born into a country of civil war. I lived in Sri Lanka for 19 years of my life. We had a civil war for 28 years. So I have a perspective living through a war. Now, in retrospect, I look back at it. One thing, this is actually one of the reasons why the rise of anti-vaccination movement is, you can draw a certain parallel here, is how successful vaccination has been and how normalized it has become, because it's part and parcel of life. People in the West, most people have never seen a kid with polio. It's never been a problem. So then you relegate against the system, etc. In the West, life has, actually all over the world, human life has gradually gotten better. What is defined as abject poverty, the numbers are changing. Yes, there is some disparity. There is actually very clear income inequality that exists. Not trying to take any of that away. I'm not trying to take away racism, but people can't really say with a straight face racism faced 100 years ago by an African American versus a racism facing today's majority of African American people. It's the same.
Right.
I know some people would like to paint that narrative, but there isn't a single data point that will really validate that. And I'm not trying to take away individual suffering that people may have gone through. And because of this lack of suffering, we all have a need. Lots of people have this need to do good, right? And generally, because of the philosophical underpinnings of the left, there is this need to progress, stand up for minority rights, and help overall people. It's part and parcel of certain underpinning philosophies. So people seem to create almost non-existing oppressive system to fight against, because for the narrative to work, you need a bad guy. This idea of pure evil, which is not a reality, but it is created. Right? Let's take, for example, sort of the BLM movement. There's a political movement, and I think there's a philosophical movement. There's a difference.
There's different parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the movement that is, to founders with Marxist ideologies, who would say, when they say defund police, they literally mean it. It's not about giving money to social workers, and they mean defund the police,
right?
Literal meaning of the word. But that is in direct contradiction of 81% of African Americans actually want either the same or more police in their neighborhoods, right? But the narrative I've mentioned, defund the police, comes on the back of a story about pure evil,
right? Where
the system, here's the evidence, here's the system killing a person, but presented as here's the system here's one police officer killing one person, but now let's flip it. Here is the entire system killing all of us.
Right.
You create this narrative, then now you're no longer fighting against one thing. Now the fighting against the system is coming up. And part of that, for some people, the idea of being a victim gives them some social credential almost. They want to talk about, even in sort of conversations I've had, when people play this oppression Olympics, it frustrates me to no end.
I literally wrote down in my notes the grievance Olympics. I was going to bring that up in a bit. That you're exactly on that point. That's right.
It doesn't. And I've had this argument more than once, and I've told people, if we play that game, I will win, but I don't want to play that game,
Right.
Because of my life experiences, that. But to your original question is, once you create the narrative of a victim and you're fighting against, that's what's leading most of sort of what's happening around American universities. And this is all inspired by a certain ideology, right? So I think it is this idea, you need to fight against something. Doesn't matter how small it is, you will blow it out of proportion. Then now you have the evil to fight against.
And why is it that you think, and this is for both of you because you both researched this, and this is something I am been curious about for a very long time. Why does the bad guy have to be the West? There are so many sub-bad guys that could have been chosen along the way that were true bad guys. But instead, we have to make it all about the whole system. Now, I understand postmodernism and modernism, and the way you laid it out in the film, I was very familiar with. So I'm not asking about that. But except for, is it part of the postmodern philosophy that the West should be torn down? Is that actually inherent in that? Because I didn't get that in my study of postmodernism as such. But somehow that seems to have gotten entered into this, that the bad guy is the same structure. This is the self-destructive mode of this that I want to ask you about, is it's the same structure that is providing the rights to protest, to speak your mind, to write what you want, to say what you want, where you want. Those are rights afforded to you by the West, by Western systems. You don't have those rights in China. You don't have those rights in Russia. And yet we're the bad guys. And so I keep wondering, where does that come from? You got an answer for me on that one?
Let's tackle this by part. Postmodernism isn't Marxist as much as people think it is, because postmodernism is a rejection of all grand narratives, technically. Now, what's happened, this is where I try to make, this is maybe a small contribution of the film, I try to demarcate what Peterson conflates. So Peterson says postmodern neo-Marxist, whereas I say postmodern inspired fields, because they're technically not postmodern neo-Marxist. They're inspired by them, and what they've done is they've taken the justification that all truths and all claims are driven by power, and they've used that. So that it's like they've hobbled together a piece of clothing, but from different brands, and they've picked and chosen what they've wanted, perhaps in order to justify disliking the West. Now, why would they dislike the West? Now, to get, Petersonian on this, one might say it's something like Cain and Abel, which is that you see the success of others, and then you have to point the finger somewhere. Now, you can point it to yourself or you can point it to the world. What you saw as a reason for the people on the extreme left to not believe what they believe, that is, look at the rights afforded to you by the West and the luxuries of the West, actually works against them. Because if you see yourself as a failure, if you see yourself as not achieving what you think you should, or not being as good as you think you should be, or not having what other people have, even though you have so much opportunity, well, what's wrong with you? So you can look to yourself. Desh is right, there has to be an enemy. I would say the enemy has to be the self, in the sense that, now this is like, well, I would say that the enemy is other people, but it's also yourself. And the more that you remedy your own maliciousness inside, the more you do so by example to others. And you can see the reverse of this, where if you're callous and hateful and invidious, that replicates, and it's not good for your family, it's not good for you, and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. So the opposite can have a dampening effect, or maybe even a reverse effect. But it's painful. It's painful. It's painful. It's painful to look at yourself. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. So the finger has to be pointed somewhere.
Interesting.
Let me add a couple of things. like many things that the left doesn't want to talk about. I mean, you spoke about left's reluctance to talk about the Uyghurs or what's happening in the Middle East. I tackled this in my last movie, Islam and the Future of Tolerance. And I actually got into a lot of trouble asking, actually, I'm going to name Roxane Gay, a very popular feminist. Does feminists in the West have a responsibility to talk more about the oppression women face in countries that have a clear Sharia-driven legal system? And that didn't go down well.
Really?
I think it's you wouldn't have guessed, right? So the point is, the point is, the left has a compulsion to protect the small guy, and there's a misunderstanding of protecting one's human rights versus protecting any atrocity or anything that small community may have done, because you're worried you're going to give credence to the far right to eliminate those people. There's no middle ground. It's we don't go there. It's we all know that's not a rational way to approach. So the reason I'm mentioning this is with regards to political extremism and why there is a political left has this a negative view, making the West the bad guy. One has to admit it is grounded in some truth, because the West has a colonial history. Now, it is not exclusive to the West. I mean, this is where it becomes, where the narrative is, colonial West is it's a great. I mean, this is Curt mentions it. The political far left is fantastic with rhetoric and getting words to the mainstream. Colonial West sounds like it's an original thing that the West exclusively did. You just need to look at history. It's not the case. But the point is, because of the atrocities caused during the West when it was colonizing countries, it does give people credence to challenge. Now, you guys do all this, and this is why we are still like this. There is a kernel of truth to some of that. It is not entirely true, just like it's not an entire lie. So there is, and then the advent of internet and social media has popularized being against the Western American hegemony, quite especially because America played World Cup for a long time, and American foreign policy, there are catastrophic failures.
Yes.
Right. It again gives credence to this idea. This is the colonial mindset. America is very easy to make the bad guy. The West is actually quite easy to be turned into the bad guy because it has its own failures, and it's a bit of a paradox, but it then provides you with the freedoms for you to do as you suggested. Like, when people, yes, I think Donald Trump is, as you point out, malignant narcissist, terrible for America. But when people were comparing him to Hitler, I found that to be, okay, you're missing the point. How can he be Hitler and have, at the same time, iTunes has the number one track is Fuck Donald Trump?
Right.
Like, it wouldn't happen. That's not how this works, right? The same goes to people who are saying Joe Biden is Stalin. Like, it's not the case. Right? But my point I like to reiterate is the West, because of its freedoms, doesn't help itself. It's the paradox. It's easy to make the bad guy. And West also is so good at its PR, like American films. I mean, I can see you love your film, right? The Marvel universe, it's the bad guy is generally quite black and white.
Yes.
Like Darth Vader, yes, there are some philosophical complexities, but just the simplest view of it is it's dark, and he just wants to kill everything, and it's a simplified version of good and bad, and the whole world sees it that way. And people who want to who has a ulterior political motive uses that naive explanation of, and that's why when the thing ISIS did best, and Al Qaeda, and most of those radical organizations did, was to pit Islam or Muslims against the West. And then that narrative, they had enough evidence to showcase that narrative using the same techniques of storytelling, good versus bad.
Yep.
So yeah.
And that's right. And that's the themes, or what does Peterson call them? The
archetypes.
Yes, the archetypes. That's it. Yeah, the stories, the narratives. That's right.
It's a Jungian term, but yeah.
Yeah, it's right, from Jung. It's one of the few philosophical things I see eye to eye with Peterson on, but I think the way he explains it is overly complicated. Now,
I tend to agree.
Yeah, he definitely uses a $20 word where a $5 word would have worked. Okay, now there's another claim that you make that I wanted to get you guys to speak to in the film, because I thought it was smart and I wanted to bring it up. Words are violence. You make an argument that the words are violence idea is crafty because it is used to lead down a path of fallacious thinking that this therefore justifies real world violence. If words are violence, ideas are violence, you have now committed violence against me, I am therefore justified in bringing a baseball bat to, my protest. And I have had personal exchanges with Antifa folks going to these protests, talking about how preemptive violence is the only solution to neo-Nazis or right-wing alt-right extremists. Is you have to throw the rocks first. You got to hit them over the head because they're guaranteed to come and kill you. So you are completely justified in taking them out first. And that's where the whole, punch a Nazi thing a couple of years ago and all that was really very popular. So my question to you is, you've presented this argument that this is a thing. I thought it was a good argument. You have any commentary on how that argument's going now, or where you think it might go in the future? Do you think that there will be more real world violence because of that line of thinking? Or is there a way of tamping that out right away that we're just not thinking of right now?
When you conceptualize words as violence, then what you do is self-defense, and legally you can kill in self-defense. I point that out in the film. So they see what they're doing as a protective act rather than while they'll say it's preemptive. I mean, in your conversation with them, it's preemptive, but in the back of their mind, they're doing something benevolent.
That's right.
So it's dangerous, and violence begets violence.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that was my problem with it. I tried pointing out, let me ask you what you think about this.
Yeah.
I tried pointing out to these folks when I had a chance to, in direct conversation with them, hey, Daryl Davis. You guys know who Daryl Davis is? The black man who has personally disrobed hundreds of KKK members through personal conversation.
Heard of him.
He's amazing. He's done a TED Talk. He's been on Rogan. He's definitely worth looking into, mostly because what he does works. And what he does is he just respects the person in front of him and converses with them and says, look, you hate me and you've never even met me. What's up? And from that springboard of conversation, he then, literally becomes friends with people. He says he has become personal friends with people who were, and even still are in some instances, KKK white supremacists. And he's a black man. He's a jazz musician. He has no formal training in any of this. He just decided to go do it. And I thought, now here's a guy who is somebody worth watching and following and paying attention to, because this is how you do it. This is how, if you really want to change hearts and minds, this is how you do it. And I thought I wanted to get, your input on that, because I wondered, do you see any evidence of that kind of thing happening with the folks on the extreme ends of this? Is there a way of, in other words, is there a way that we can talk them down? Is there a way we can pull them back? Is there a way we can converse in a civil way? Are there entry points into this headspace, to do that work? And is that work necessary? Is that even something that should be done? What do you think?
Desh, do you look like you want to speak?
Yeah. I mean, well, there's a few things to unpack there. Mm-hmm. But let me start by saying, absolutely, this is work that needs to be done, because if you don't do it, we are going to walk into a incredibly difficult situation in the West, and it may be a little too late. I think we have plenty of time. And Sam Harris said, you have a choice between conversation and violence. You right now, the most powerful tool we have is conversation. I mentioned earlier, I think I did, from Sri Lanka, we had a civil war for 28 years. In 2012, I went back to Sri Lanka to do some work for a non-for-profit called Sri Lanka Unites. And the work we did was inspired by a data set, which is 70% of Sri Lankans have not had one meaningful conversation or a friend from the other. The majority of Sri Lankans are Sinhalese, and the largest minority are Tamil. I am from the Sinhalese majority, and it got me thinking, how many Tamil friends do I have? And I realized I don't. And it sort of startled me. I remember in my school, we had segregated classes. And then the bulk of the work we did was to basically invite students, 500 odd students, to one place and have a range of activities over 5 days with the intention of specifically letting them become friends and letting them have conversations. It started off with incredible resistance, people from Sinhala majority South coming up to the North and having Tamil kids and refusing to share a room with a Tamil kid. 5 days later, after lots of sports, lots of singing and dancing together, they find their common humanity and then realize, okay, I didn't know the other, because it's easy to otherize a person and hate them because they're not even human. So one of the problems with extreme thinking is you otherize, and you're no longer hating a person, you're hating this other. So it is super important we have conversations, and the aim of the film is not to go after the left or the right for that matter, but rather seeing points of view and their origins and what they may be able to do, and then hopefully you can take the information you just gathered, and next time when you speak to somebody, you can have a better conversation because you have some grounding to where they're coming from.
Right. Exactly. In other words, those kids got breakfast clubbed.
Right.
I mean, that's it. That's that you stick people in a room and you make them talk to each other, and suddenly they find out they're real people.
It's very hard to hate somebody you've seen, interacted with. I'll give one example, anecdotal. After that very tumultuous event I mentioned, where I spoke to Roxanne Gay, I was reached out to by a young lady. She wanted some help, but she was captured by something I said on stage. I was hosting this event, and I said, a lack of conversation led to over 100,000 of my people dying. We can't let that ever happen again. She reached out to me and she made an assumption and she asked for my help, and I helped her to my best ability. But the assumption she made was, when I said my people, I meant Sri Lankans, regardless of Tamil or Sinhalese. She made an assumption that I was either Tamil or Sinhalese, and the help she wanted, she thought I was Tamil, so she asked to help with dying a former terrorist. And I did help. And for me, I was helping another human being. He may have a terrible history, but I was helping. And I don't think she'll ever watch this or hear this. I think she still thinks I'm Tamil. And the idea there was, again, when you appeal to the common humanity, like I don't think even if she finds out now I'm Sinhalese, will she hate me? I don't think so, because it's not something, what I've done is not something that she would deem as the other will do.
Right. Exactly. You break the stereotypes.
Yep.
And by breaking them, you break the thinking about stereotypes, because they're presented with cognitive dissonance and they have to resolve it. And there it is, right in their face. And when it's right in your face, it's a hell of a lot easier to be in denial about it. It just is. It's just harder, What do you think, Curt?
I have so many thoughts that it's difficult for me to put them in order.
Okay.
Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so what is the question?
Well, the question had to do with the words or violence idea, right? And how far is this going to go? Can we pull people back from this? Should we do that work? We brought up Daryl Davis.
Right. Okay,
right?
okay. So the extreme left, they characterize themselves, so it's not just a straw man, as disliking logic and reason and so on. That's part of their postmodern influence. So then the question is, well, how do you converse with someone who doesn't believe in conversation? Who doesn't believe in conversation, who believes that the act of you speaking is an imposition of dominance on your part to their, and you're already in the, not the underdog, the opposite of the overdog position. So then that's tricky, right? Because, see, this is one of the reasons why me and Desh disagree, because we disagree as to what the solution is. I imagine you're, Chris, on the side of Desh, where you would say that conversation is paramount, critical thinking is what will lead us to salvation. But I'm more of the position that conversation is, by the way, what specific subfield of psychology are you studying?
Coercive control.
Okay. So there's a word called concomitant. It's from medicine. It's naturally accompanying. So I believe conversation is concomitant, but it's not a necessary precondition. And the reason is, well, here's one. Like animals, some of our closest relatives can get along. They don't have articulated speech. They don't converse. So how do they do it? Well, one is you extend an olive branch. You show love. And now this is like, if you're a true hero, which I don't know who of us can claim to be, though this Daryl person seems to be one of them. If you show true love, then that means you're even willing to die for people who you dislike, your enemies. And if you show that and you mean it, I think the actions are far more powerful than the words. And the words are necessary because we're gonna have conflict somewhere. So where are we going to conflict? Are we going to conflict in physical space, that is, with clashing fists and swords and guns, or in verbal space with our words? And I do agree that yes, you conflict with your words first, or hopefully only, and you never conflict with your body. Well, while you might be able to you might not be able to appeal to their critical thinking or to their reason or logic because they already eschew it. They say so. It's not just you making fun of them. Then while they cannot be motivated by that, it's difficult for them not to be motivated by their evolutionary instinct. And that is you demonstrate by your actions how you want the world to be, and people see that, and hopefully they admire it, and hopefully they see you as someone who is not characterized by the demon inside that they think you are because of your race. It also could go the other direction where they, in the Cain and Abel example, they see your goodness. If you are motivated by goodness, they see your good acts as just more evidence that they're insufficient and they hate you more. So it could go in the opposite direction, but hopefully with friendship, like Desh mentioned, that's powerful. Like reaching out, even touching, shaking the hands of someone, saying that you're wrong. Sorry, that I'm wrong. Sorry, when I'm speaking to you, I know that I'm wrong, and I know that I'm pig-headed, and I hope that I'm not coming across as so please show me where I'm wrong. I disagree with you, but look, you're a person. You've experienced way more than probably, like I've had a great and fairly easy life. So I imagine you haven't, and I'm sorry if I'm contributing to that. So how about we take it from here and maybe we can create something loving based in truth, even though they reject truth.
Right. It's a conundrum, isn't it? It's a real brain twister trying to think this stuff through. I actually have a little bit of a middle road between both of you, just so you know, because pure logic and reason is not the way that you bring somebody back from an emotional cliff, and I believe that extremism is an emotional cliff. It's driven by emotion, not reason or logic, and I believe that the logic and reason that's utilized is more there to rationalize or justify the emotional investment that must be there in order to have the depth of feeling and extremism, that belief in a thing. So you don't get there without emotion. Nobody coldly reasons their way to that.
Nobody coldly reasons
not unless
their
you're a
way to
psychopath.
anything. This is Damasio's work, that you need emotion. So some people who say, yeah, facts over feelings. I actually, even though I bash the extreme left in the, I wouldn't say that I do takedowns like Ben Shapiro, but I don't agree with Ben Shapiro's facts over feelings, and I'm a mathematician.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not a mathematician. Like that's a huge honor. I've studied math and physics. Like my background is science, because you can't move if you only believe in facts. The reason is you won't be able to assess the amount of data that you're inundated with rationally enough to move your finger or to make any enactment. So feeling is necessary. You can see this with people who have frontal lobe lesions. Okay, you give them a choice between a red pen and a blue pen. Actually, right. You give them a choice between a red pen and a blue pen, and they're immobilized because they're computing which one is best.
That's right.
You can tell them, okay, calculate this square root of 3,255,000, and then they'll do so for hours or at least tens of minutes, because they don't have a part of their brain that's emotional that they use as a heuristic to filter what's relevant and what's not.
Correct. Exactly. And that is why emotion drives everything that we do. And that's why I know for a fact that you're not going to logic somebody out of a position if you do not first do exactly what I believe you described. If you do not show respect, if you do not show some degree of love. I mean, it doesn't have to be romantic love, but it certainly has to be respect. You can't change a heart and a mind of somebody who believes that you hate them, that believes that you don't like them, that you don't want to have anything to do with them, because they're not going to open up to you in the first place. So you'll get nowhere. So anyway, so I think these things are complementary. I don't think it's all one or the other. I think that there is a skill set involved in this. It's not something just everybody can do. And it requires, some emotional intelligence and sensitivity to know who you're talking to and how it's going. Because if it's going off the rails, you better be able to have enough empathy with the person to detect that. That's kind of part of the process. So anyway, that's where I live, though. But your film, I think, gives people some impetus and some drive and some initiative, some reason why we should do something about this. And that's why I appreciated watching it, because it gave me some information I didn't have before, and it presented it in definitely a more objective way than I have seen others do it. So I do want to thank you for putting it together. I think I'm trying to be aware of timing. I think we're going to have to wrap up in a minute. So I wanted to give you guys a chance, both of you, if you had anything else you wanted to end with as far as reasons why my viewers should watch your movie. Go to the site. We will have the link in the description section here that you gave at the beginning of the show, so you don't have to repeat all that, but just any sort of final words on this subject.
Well, I'll add this. If you care about anything we've spoken about, and if you have any sort of worry about where Western civilization is heading, and if you feel as these kind of conversations need to be heard, films like ours need to be at least be a mediocre success. And the only way for it to be, because we're not backed by large organizations, studios, etc., entirely independently made and distributed. So the only way this would work is if you watch it, for starters, and if you get anything out of it, telling other people. Yeah. So humble request, consider this movie. If you like it, tell somebody else.
Right. And to add on to what Desh is saying, it's not like we haven't had offers from certain organizations. It's not like we've been inundated, but it's not like we haven't. Let's imagine, I'm just going to make this up, but that the Koch brothers wanted to donate to us. Now, there's a part of us that's like, well, who cares where the money comes from? Because we're going to say what we want to say truthfully as best we can anyway. And it might even work to our favor if we go say something anti-right winged, and we were still given money by some organization that's considered to be a consummate example of the right. Well, we chose skillfully and difficultly to stay in the independent route. So if you like that, then please support it with sharing it. Please support it with money, in the sense that you buy the film. And the best way, the absolute best way that you could support it is, and I mean this, don't mean to sound hokey, but it's so here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm a proponent of. If you want the world to be in a certain way, or viewpoint to be dominant, then you have to act in that way. And if you want to be liked or even loved, despite that you're a cis white male and you're considered to be the worst of the lot, then that means you have to love your enemy. And that means if you're someone who is black and you hate white people, that means despite the fact that you think white people spit at your face or behind your back at you, you still have to love them. And then here's what I'm toying with, is that I'm wondering how much of that distaste for the other, as it's commonly called, is a distaste for self. And as much as I dislike the New Age movement for saying love yourself, I dislike that because of I have my own personal grievances against that. But there is something to it, and love yourself doesn't mean just be kind to yourself and self-care, but there's something deeper. It's not clear what love is, like you mentioned as well. Like, is it just romantic love? Is it friendship love? Love is tricky, but hopefully you know it when you feel it. And perhaps much of our problems can be solved if we love one another, but that also starts with loving oneself. And then, well, there's much to be said about that.
For sure.
Chris, Chris, before you go, I do have a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Fire away.
Okay. You said you watched the film twice. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious what you disagreed with most, and I'm curious what you liked the most.
What I liked the most was what I thought even was a little was almost cute to me, was how you broke down modernism and postmodernism and that timeline, and then thought you took too long doing it and it was too complicated for some people to understand, because I thought it was beautifully presented in a very simple way And I've watched through 2-3 hour lectures on that topic. So I've gone all the way down that rabbit hole, and it can get complicated. And there's a lot of names and a lot of words and a lot of verbiage thrown around in modernism and postmodernism, and understanding how it connects to the Enlightenment, and and understanding how it was an art movement as well as a cultural movement, a philosophical movement, etc. So you simplified that enormously, and I thought that was great. So major kudos to that. I thought that your summation of right-wing extremism was a bit simple, Simon. White people are good, right? Or however you summarize that. Fair enough. That is absolutely a core value of extreme alt-right thinking, but there are others too, and there's more depth to that than I think was given appreciation in the film. However, I didn't particularly think that was some major catastrophe because of the theme and subject matter and orientation of the film. But I thought it was a little bit of a dishonest, one versus the other sort of thing, because the right's not simple, Simon, not really. And
hey, man, if you have a more nuanced view of the right, or you have some articles or papers, please send them my way, because I wasn't able to uncover any.
Fair enough.
But maybe I didn't investigate it enough.
I think if you dive into the evangelical end of things, you'll find other motivations and other reasonings going on over there than just white supremacy as a thought, as a belief set, or as an ideology. I think it's mixed up with ideas of nationalism, patriotism. I think they have confused ideas about those concepts, but I think that those are mixed up in it. And I think that has to do with national identity. There are identity issues there. But the identity politics of the right is a little bit unanalyzed versus versus the identity politics of the left. It's so much easier to see it on the left. So.
Okay. I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's my breakdown.
Maybe that's blue number 2. Better left unsaid number 2.
There you go.
Better right unsaid.
That's right. Better left. Oh, yeah, right. I did not catch that. Thank you for pointing out that double entendre. That was good. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be on my show, for sending me an invite through your folks to talk to you. I very much enjoyed this, and I actually really honestly hope that we have the opportunity to do it again.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
I also enjoyed it, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
Awesome, man. Okay, guys. See ya.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, bye-bye. And let me just wrap up real fast on the show by saying, everybody, like the show, share the show, check out their movie, and if you like my podcast, help me out on Patreon. Okay, guys. Bye-bye.